Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about the Heisman Watch we've been doing throughout the week. Got into the ACC a little bit, a lot of really interesting players out there. But let's jump into the last segment here and let's talk about Lincoln Riley and why I think 2024 might just be the inflection point for his entire career. When we look back on Lincoln Riley's career, whether it's fondly or not so fondly, I think 2024 could be the inflection point in all of that. So I want to break down what I mean by that and why I think this year has become so much more important over the last couple of weeks. As you know, we've talked about USC quite a bit on here, and it's usually been on the recruiting segments, and it's usually not been too kind. There's been some times, they got Hayden Lowe on that group and was very complimentary of them just kind of you got to keep taking shots, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about here. But the reality is they did lose Justice Terry. They did lose Isaiah Gibson. They are fighting for their lives with Hilton Stubbs, who might just be making his way down to Miami here pretty soon. So there's going to be this type of battle back and forth. Traquan Fagans has walked out the door, a very talented cornerback that they really liked from this class. So there was a very concerted effort in this early part of this offseason for USC and for Lincoln Riley in particular to come out and say, we are different. We are going to go about business differently. We're going to be more hard-nosed. We're going to work harder. We're going to do all of the things that we haven't done in the past, to be totally honest with you, whether it was Oklahoma or USC. You look at those defenses, they were just not good defenses. And it wasn't because there wasn't talent there. It wasn't because they didn't have guys that could play good defense. It was because of the way that they were going about business in that building, from, strength conditioning to the way that they were implementing a defense to a ton of different things. But the reality is, it's got to change at some point, and he has made that shift, right? Everything he said up until this point, he said everything right, essentially. He's, said all the right stuff. He's made it very clear that this is an inflection point, and he's absolutely going to make sure that they move in the right direction from here, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But the reality is, you need guys coming in, and if you can't sell guys when you're not so good at defense, you're never really going to be able to get to the point that he wants to be. And that's kind of the big battle in recruiting, where sometimes you have to sell guys a vision. You have to sell guys a future that is not here yet and that they can't see. And that can be tough, especially for a team that has not been good on defense by any means over the last couple of years. But the reality is they still have some guys on this class that are really important and that are really good players. Hilton Stubbs being one of them. Very important to keep him on the roster. A very talented safety that, frankly, could start for them day one when he steps on campus. Tristan Castro is another one. Hayden Lowe, we talked about, a very talented edge rusher. Matai Tawagoai, excuse me, I apologize if I messed that up, but a very talented linebacker. All of these guys are hugely important. They're the most important people in the world to the USC staff right now, and they just have to be in this class. This defensive class of recruits can be really talented, but the reality is when you're rebuilding a defense, it tends to be a little bit harder than offense, just across the board, especially for someone like Lincoln Riley, where bringing in offensive guys is never going to be a problem, especially at the quarterback position, especially at the wide receiver positions. He's never going to struggle there. I have no doubts about that. But the reality is, you got to make sure that when you get into the Big Ten, even this year, you can prove that you can hang. You don't necessarily have to blow guys out of the water. You don't necessarily have to make this huge leap defensively, but you do have to show that you can, play with these teams. You do have to show that you have the ability to make a couple of plays here and there and, play up to a couple of these defenses that you're going to be up against. Now, they're going to play some offenses that are just going to be impossible to stop, to be totally honest with you. LSU, Michigan, maybe Notre Dame, but the reality is they can show a lot in the other games, and they can show a lot in those games even just by, stifling them from time to time, not necessarily stopping them by any means, but doing your best to be bend, don't break. And the biggest thing for me, and why I frankly am very complimentary of Lincoln Riley right now, and why I think this is going to be a good year for him in the long run than anything else, is because of the difference he made in, or the change he made in defensive coordinator. It had to happen. Alex Grinch was just not working. Not to say he's not a very talented coach, because I tend to believe he is, frankly, but the reality is it just wasn't working. There was plenty of talent struggles. There were plenty of other struggles in that building other than Alex Grinch, but you needed someone else to come in, and I thought they absolutely nailed it. D'Anton Lynn is someone that can do a lot with a little, and that's no disrespect to UCLA's roster, but let's be totally honest, USC's is just more talented across the board than UCLA's is, but UCLA was one of the best defenses in the country a year ago. Gave up 18 points per game a year ago, had 68 yards rushing given up per game. Insane production from a team that just isn't as talented as USC is. Top 10 defense in the country. So a lot to like about what's coming in for them. And I think he's someone that is as important as really anyone in this rebuild. I mean, last year, USC was 116th in the country in total defense. They've got to be better than that. They don't have to be leaps and bounds better than that. If you can get up to the 80 or 70 mark, I think you're good, to be totally honest with you. I think you have the ability to say, we've taken this big time step, and now we're going to take another one. And then after that, we're going to take another. It's a building process, obviously, but 2024 gives you an idea of if they really mean business, if all of the stuff that they say is happening behind the scenes with conditioning and with weight training and with just the toughness that they bring to that building is actually happening. You'll find out this year, because if that is happening behind the scenes, the defense will improve just by scheme, just by energy, just by conditioning, just by weight training, just by all of those little things piling up. They're going to get better. If they're below 500, if they're below 100 again on the total defenses ranking, there's going to be some questions to be had about, is there just a lack of talent level that can be there at USC? And the question becomes, then you still have to sell the vision to the football players that are coming in, to the recruits that are coming in. You no longer get to sell, we made this huge jump year one. Imagine what we can do year two. Now you have to say, I promise year one was just an anomaly, and we can get past that and keep making leaps forward in year two, year three, year four. So they're kind of getting hit from a lot of different directions, right? You have to make sure that you improve. You have to make sure that you get up into the 80-ish mark, let's say, is a good moniker for this team. They don't have to be top 25, I promise you that. But I think if they do that, Lincoln Riley has national championships in his future. When you look back at his past teams, he was as close as you can really get. The reality was he never had the defense good enough to get there. If the defense is fixed, there's really no reason to believe this guy can't be a multiple-time national championship guy. And he's kind of fallen down the coach's list over the last couple of years. He'd rocket back up very quickly if this defense gets in order. I can promise you that. So overall, I tend to believe, if I had to give you an answer of which way is this going to go, I'd say he's going to be more than fine. I'd say this is going to be a really solid year, not necessarily a gangbusters year by any means, but I think it's going to be a really solid year, and I think it's going to propel him into what's going to be his golden age of coaching, if you will. I think this is going to be the year where over the next, whether it's 8 years, a decade, I don't know, he's going to make a lot of waves, and he's going to do a lot of really incredible things. But it starts this year, and it starts with that defense just getting a little bit better, making that leap, and then getting some of those recruits that you've lost out on the past, like Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson. Maybe they start looking in your direction again. So that's kind of the big battle that they're under right now, and it'll be fascinating to watch this develop from recruiting to this upcoming season to right after the season when all of this kind of comes to fruition. But it'll be fascinating to watch all of that unfold. I think Lincoln Riley might be only second to Ryan Day coming in with as much pressure into this year. Actually, Dabo would be number 2 on my list. But in terms of pressure, there's very few guys that are above Lincoln Riley going into this year. But it's going to be fascinating to watch. There's no two ways about that. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook for all of the content and updates. Follow us on the YouTube page as well. We have so many people doing just incredible work across every single sport you could think of. Tons of people doing basketball, baseball, football, everything you could possibly want. So we totally have you covered over here at GSMC with anything you need in the world of sports. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.